Greenhouse gases act like a protective blanket around Earth, trapping heat in our atmosphere and making life as we know it possible. Without this natural greenhouse effect, our planet would be too cold for most living things to survive. But while this process is essential, it's also delicate. Too much of these gases, and the balance is lost. The main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, were once kept in check by natural cycles. However, human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, have dramatically increased their concentrations. Deforestation and large-scale agriculture also contribute, releasing even more of these heat-trapping gases into the air. Since the Industrial Revolution, our emissions have soared to unprecedented levels. Factories, power plants, and vehicles have thickened the greenhouse blanket, causing global temperatures to rise at an alarming rate. This rapid change is unlike anything Earth has experienced in millions of years. The consequences are already visible: melting glaciers and ice caps, rising sea levels that threaten coastal cities, and more frequent and severe weather events like hurricanes, droughts, and wildfires. These changes put communities, agriculture, and water supplies at risk, affecting millions of people worldwide. To address these challenges, we first need to understand exactly how much of these gases we're putting into the atmosphere. Measuring emissions is the foundation of any effective climate action plan. Scientists use advanced tools and techniques to track where emissions come from and how they change over time. Tracking emissions isn't just an academic exercise, it's essential for creating smart policies and holding both governments and industries accountable. Reliable data helps communities understand their own impact and empowers them to demand change. Accurate, up-to-date information allows scientists to model future climate scenarios and helps policymakers target the biggest sources of pollution. This data is crucial for setting realistic goals and measuring progress. Without reliable numbers, our efforts to fight climate change are little more than guesswork. We risk wasting resources and missing opportunities to make a real difference. That's why greenhouse gas reporting programs are so crucial. They transform invisible pollution into clear, actionable data, making it possible to track progress and identify where more work is needed. The debate over whether to continue these programs isn't just about bureaucracy. It's about whether we're truly committed to facing climate change with facts, transparency, and a sense of shared responsibility for our planet's future. The Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program, or GHGRP, was created by the EPA to shine a light on the sources of climate pollution across the United States. Recognizing the urgent need for reliable data, the EPA established this program as a cornerstone of its efforts to combat climate change. The GHGRP is not just a bureaucratic requirement, it's a powerful tool that helps the nation understand where emissions are coming from and how they can be reduced. By tracking emissions from the nation's largest polluters, the program provides a clear picture of the industries and facilities that contribute most to greenhouse gas emissions. This information is crucial for identifying trends, setting priorities, and measuring progress over time. Facilities emitting over 25,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases annually must report their data, covering sectors like power plants, refineries, and manufacturing. This threshold ensures that the program focuses on the biggest sources of emissions, while still capturing a broad range of industrial activity. The data collected includes not just carbon dioxide, but also methane, nitrous oxide, and other potent greenhouse gases. The EPA verifies this data and makes it public through the Flight database, an interactive online tool that gives everyone, from researchers and policymakers to concerned citizens, access to detailed pollution information. This open access allows communities to see what's happening in their own backyards and empowers them to take action. This transparency is the backbone of evidence-based climate policy, guiding regulations and empowering communities. When people have access to accurate, up-to-date information, they can advocate for stronger protections, hold polluters accountable, and participate in the democratic process. The GHGRP covers about 8,000 facilities, accounting for up to 90% of U.S. industrial emissions. This comprehensive coverage means that policymakers and scientists can track changes at both the national and local levels, identifying which regions and sectors are making progress and which need more attention. Its detailed facility-level data is essential for targeted policymaking and public oversight. By breaking down emissions by facility, the GHGRP enables more precise regulation and helps ensure that efforts to reduce pollution are both effective and fair. For over a decade, it's been the federal government's most important source of climate pollution data. The program's consistency and reliability have made it a trusted resource for everyone working to address the climate crisis. Ending the program would undermine the nation's ability to address climate change with real information. Without the GHGRP, policymakers, scientists, and communities would be left in the dark, making it much harder to protect our environment and our future. The EPA's move to end the GHGRP sparked immediate backlash from Democratic lawmakers. Led by Congressman Sean Casten, they argue the EPA lacks authority to dismantle a program established by Congress. They warn that ending the GHGRP would blind policymakers and the public, making it impossible to track emissions or measure progress. The data isn't just for Washington. States and researchers nationwide rely on it for their own climate programs. Without it, states would face costly, inconsistent alternatives or abandon their goals altogether. Lawmakers see this as part of a troubling trend of sidelining science and transparency. They argue that dismantling the program would set back climate action at every level of government. Critics of the GHGRP argue it's an expensive regulatory burden for American businesses, especially energy and heavy industry. They claim reporting emissions requires significant resources, diverting funds from innovation and job creation. Some estimate ending the program could save the private sector billions in compliance costs. Opponents say the data collection doesn't directly reduce emissions, it just adds paperwork. They believe market forces and corporate responsibility, not federal mandates, should drive environmental progress. Ending the program, they argue, would free businesses to pursue sustainability on their own terms. The EPA is caught between legal mandates, political pressure, and its own scientific staff. Administrator Lee Zeldin faces demands from both industry and environmental advocates. The agency's cautious public response reflects deep divisions over climate policy. While the administration pushes deregulation, the program's congressional origins raise legal questions about unilateral termination. Internally, many EPA staff see the GHGRP as vital to their mission and would resist its dismantling. The agency's decision will test its commitment to science and independent regulation in a polarized era. Critics see the move against the GHGRP as part of a broader pattern of scientific censorship. They point to past efforts to suppress or alter climate data, sideline scientists, and cut research budgets. Ending the GHGRP is viewed as another step in undermining the nation's ability to respond to climate change with facts. This erodes public trust and discourages open scientific inquiry. The debate is about more than one program. It's about whether policy will be guided by evidence or ideology. The fate of the GHGRP has become a proxy for the larger struggle over science in government. The outcome will shape the future of evidence-based policymaking in the U.S. While Washington debates, states and cities rely on GHGRP data to drive their own climate action. Programs like California's Cap and Trade and the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative depend on federal emissions data for accuracy and consistency. State agencies use the data to track progress, target polluters, and design effective policies. Local governments and environmental justice groups use it to advocate for cleaner air in vulnerable communities. Without the GHGRP, states would face costly, fragmented alternatives or lose the foundation for their climate efforts. Smaller states, in particular, would struggle to fill the gap. Ending the program would undermine the states leading the fight against climate change. If the GHGRP ends, the loss of reliable emissions data would ripple across government, business, and society. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about the foundation for how we understand, manage, and respond to pollution. Without this data, the entire system that tracks greenhouse gas emissions would be thrown into uncertainty, making it much harder to know where we stand or how to move forward. The EPA would struggle to regulate pollution without solid numbers, reverting to guesswork. Instead of using precise, up-to-date information to set limits and enforce rules, regulators would be forced to rely on outdated estimates or incomplete reports. This could lead to weaker enforcement, more loopholes, and a greater risk of unchecked emissions from major polluters. Some companies might welcome less paperwork, but many rely on the data for planning and to meet investor demands for transparency. Accurate emissions data helps businesses identify inefficiencies, set sustainability goals, and demonstrate progress to customers and shareholders. Without it, companies could lose their competitive edge and face increased scrutiny from the public and financial markets. Investors, researchers, and journalists would lose a key tool for accountability and analysis. The absence of trustworthy data would make it nearly impossible to track trends, compare companies, or hold leaders responsible for their climate promises. This loss would undermine public trust and make it harder to spot emerging risks or opportunities. The public would have less power to hold polluters accountable or understand local risks. Communities living near industrial sites would be left in the dark about potential health hazards, and grassroots efforts to demand cleaner air and water would lose a critical source of evidence. Internationally, the US would lose credibility on climate commitments. Other nations depend on transparent, verifiable data to measure progress and build trust in global agreements. Without it, America's leadership on climate could be called into question, weakening alliances and slowing international cooperation. The absence of this data would set back climate action for years, making solutions harder to achieve. Scientists and policymakers would have to work with blind spots, delaying innovation and making it more difficult to target the biggest sources of emissions. The stakes are high. Without data, we're flying blind in the fight against climate change. Reliable information is our compass, and losing it means risking not just progress, but the health and safety of communities, economies, and the planet itself. The fight over the GHGRP is about more than politics. It's about the value of information. Accurate, transparent data is the foundation of any real solution to climate change. The GHGRP has made industrial pollution visible and actionable, empowering smarter policy and public advocacy. Ending it would mean choosing ignorance over knowledge, and would weaken efforts to manage emissions and hold polluters accountable. The costs of reporting are real, but far outweighed by the risks of unchecked climate change. A transparent system rewards innovation and responsibility, benefiting both the economy and the environment. The fate of the GHGRP will reveal whether we prioritize facts in future generations, or let politics and convenience decide our climate future.